Welcome to the beginning of a new nostalgia series, which begins with Percy Jackson, one of the greatest fantasy book series of the new age. Chapter 1. I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. Let's get one thing straight. I never asked to be the son of a Greek god. I never asked for any of this. If you're listening to this because you think you might be one of us, my advice is to turn this off right now. Pretend none of it is real. Because once you know, you'll start seeing them too. And once they notice you, it's only a matter of time before they come for you. So listen to my warning. But if you're a normal kid and you just want a good story, fine. Welcome to my life. My name is Percy Jackson. Until a few months ago, I was a student at Yancey Academy, a private school upstate for kids with, let's call them, behavioral challenges. I was one of those challenges. So I have ADHD and dyslexia, which means I'm fidgety in class and the letters on a page like to play musical chairs. I'd been kicked out of a different school every year. This year, I was trying to be good. Mostly. My whole world started to unravel on a school field trip to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I know, a bus full of troubled tweens heading into Manhattan. What could possibly go wrong? The only things I liked about Yancey were my best friend Grover and my Latin teacher, Mr. Brunner. Grover was an easy target. He was scrawny, cried when he got frustrated, and had a muscle disease in his legs that made him walk with a limp. He was also my only friend, so when the school bully, a kleptomaniac named Nancy Bobofit, started pegging him in the back of the head with chunks of her peanut butter and ketchup sandwich on the bus ride, I had to step in. I told her to knock it off. She didn't. I was getting dangerously close to my 3 strikes and you're out limit with the school administration. The trip didn't get much better. Mr. Brunner, who was in a motorized wheelchair, was leading the tour. He was this middle-aged guy who seemed to have a 1,000-year-old collection of Roman armor and weapons at home. He was intense, always pushing me, expecting me to know things. In front of this big stone column with a carving on it, he pointed at a picture. It was a guy eating babies. "Percy," he asked, and the whole class snickered. "What does this image represent?" I actually knew this one. "Kronos eating his kids, sir." "And why?" he pressed. "Did he do that?" "Well," I said, trying to remember. "Kronos was the king of the Titans, and he was afraid his own kids would overthrow him, just like he did to his dad, Ouranos." Mr. Brunner nodded. "Precisely. And what does this have to do with your life?" I just stared. What does any of this have to do with my life? "What you learn from me, Percy," he said, his eyes deadly serious, "is a matter of life and death. I expect you to remember that." That's when it was time for lunch. The weather had turned. A huge thunderstorm was brewing over the city. We all sat on the steps of the museum. Grover and I tried to find a spot away from Nancy, but she found us anyway, dumping the rest of her lunch right in Grover's lap. I don't remember touching her. I just remember this roar in my ears, this tug in my gut. I looked over at the fountain, and the water seemed to arch through the air, right at her. A wave crashed over her, and she landed sputtering in the fountain. The other kids started whispering, "Did you see? The water, like it grabbed her." Everyone was looking at me, and I was looking at Mrs. Dodds. Our pre-algebra teacher was this little woman who always wore a black leather jacket. She'd been my teacher since Christmas, and she absolutely hated me. Now she was smiling this triumphant, evil smile, as if I'd finally done something she'd been waiting for all semester. "Now, honey," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet, "come with me." Grover tried to stop me. He looked terrified. "It wasn't his fault, Mrs. Dodds." But she just glared at him, and he flinched. She steered me back into the museum, into the Greek and Roman exhibits. It was empty, just us and the echoes. "You've been giving us problems, honey," she said. I knew I was in for it. I was about to get expelled. Again. But that's not what she was talking about. She started making this low growling sound. Did you really think you would get away with it? Her voice didn't sound human anymore. I had no idea what she meant. And then the weirdest thing I'd ever seen in my life happened. Her eyes started to glow like embers. Her fingers grew into talons. Her jacket melted away, revealing a pair of huge leathery bat wings. She wasn't human. She was a shriveled hag with wings and claws and a mouth full of fangs. She was a nightmare. Before I could even scream, Mr. Brunner rolled his wheelchair into the gallery entrance. "Percy!" he yelled, and he tossed me a ballpoint pen. A pen. The winged monster lunged at me. I dodged, and my fingers closed around the pen in midair. The cap came off, and the pen started to grow. It stretched and thickened in my hand until I was holding a 3-foot-long sword of gleaming celestial bronze. The creature formerly known as Mrs. Dodds snarled, "Die, honey," and flew straight at me. Every muscle in my body moved on instinct. I swung the sword. The metal blade hit her shoulder and passed straight through her body as if she were made of mist. There was a bone-rattling scream, a flash of light, and she just exploded. Just gone. Vaporized into a cloud of fine yellow powder that smelled like sulfur, which then dissolved into nothing. I was alone. In my hand, I was holding a ballpoint pen. I went back outside, my heart hammering against my ribs. The rain had started. The other kids were getting back on the bus. Nancy Bobofit was still soaked, grumbling to her friends. She looked at me, then said something about me pushing her. There was no mention of the water grabbing her. I found Grover. "Where's Mrs. Dodds?" I asked him. He looked at me, completely blank. "Who?" "Our teacher," I insisted. "Mrs. Dodds, the pre-algebra teacher." He looked at me with genuine pity, like I was crazy. He said, "Percy, there is no Mrs. Dodds on this trip. There's no one with that name at Yancey. Are you feeling okay?" I even went to Mr. Brunner. He looked up from his novel. "Ah, that would be my pen. Here you are." He took the pen, not even mentioning the fact that it had just been a demon-slaying sword. I asked him about Mrs. Dodds. He stared at me, his brow furrowed. "Percy," he said gently, "there has been no Mrs. Dodds at Yancey Academy. Our pre-algebra teacher is a woman named Mrs. Kerr. And the scariest part? When I looked over at Nancy Bobofit, I saw her talking to a bubbly redhead I'd never seen before in my life. And she was calling her Mrs. Kerr. I thought I was losing my mind. But I knew what I saw. I had accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. And now no one seemed to remember she had ever existed at all. Thank you for listening to Chapter 1. Let me know if you'd like me to complete the book. Chapter 2. 3 old ladies knit the socks of death. Have you ever had a memory that you were absolutely sure was real, but everyone around you swore it never happened? That was my life for the rest of the school year. I was stuck in this full-time, 24/7 gaslighting experiment where the only subject was me. I tried to talk about it. I'd corner Grover between classes and say, "Hey, about the museum." And he'd get all fidgety. He'd start chewing on his fork, or his eyes would dart around like he was looking for an escape route. He'd stammer and say he had no idea what I was talking about. But the look in his eyes, he wasn't just confused. He was scared. It got worse. The letters in my textbook started swimming together even more than usual. My dyslexia was on overdrive. My grades tanked from C's to D's and then straight to F's. I got more detentions for being distracted, for not paying attention. But how was I supposed to concentrate on American history when I had a crystal clear memory of my math teacher turning into a bat-winged demon and exploding into dust? The only class I didn't fail was Mr. Brunner's Latin. I started looking forward to it, which is a weird thing for a kid like me. I felt like if I could just get this one thing right, I could prove I wasn't a total screw-up. So for his final exam, I actually studied. I mean, I really studied. I learned how to tell a centaur from a satyr. I memorized which gods were married to which goddesses and all the horrible things they did to each other. I was ready. But when I took the test, Mr. Brunner just stood there with this sad, disappointed look on his face. He made me feel like I'd already failed. After the exam, I was still thinking about his expression. I needed to know what I did wrong. I went back to the teacher's lounge to ask him. The door was ajar, and I heard voices inside. It was Mr. Brunner and Grover. I stopped, my hand hovering near the door. "Worried about Percy, sir," Grover was saying. His voice was trembling. "A kindly one at the school, all the way to the end of the term? I've never seen one get that close. We will simply have to redouble our efforts." Mr. Brunner's voice was heavy, tired. "The summer solstice deadline, that is the problem. We have to keep him alive until then." My blood ran cold. Keep me alive? "But I'm a failure," Grover moaned. "I'm the worst. I have to protect him. And if I fail with this one, too—" "You have not failed, Grover," Mr. Brunner said, but he sounded unconvinced. "You just have to bring him to camp safely. Form your own judgment about the boy once you see him in his element." I couldn't listen anymore. I felt sick, like I was an experiment they were talking about. My Latin textbook, full of pictures of the monsters I'd just been tested on, slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a loud thud. The voices inside stopped. I picked up the book and pushed the door open. I tried to look casual, like I hadn't just overheard them talking about me, like I was some kind of package to be delivered. I stammered out some dumb question about one of the test answers. Mr. Brunner just looked at me sadly. "Percy," he said, "this is not the place for that discussion. Go enjoy your summer." The message was clear. Get lost. I left. The last day of the term was a blur. I packed my bags, said goodbye to no one, and got on a Greyhound bus headed for the city. Grover was on the same bus. He said he was heading home for the summer, too. The whole ride, he kept looking at me, then looking away like he wanted to say something. About 100 miles from the city, the bus shuddered to a stop. A plume of smoke billowed from the engine. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere. It was hot, and the air was thick with the smell of an oncoming storm. While the driver was cursing at the engine, I looked out the window. Across the 4-lane highway was a little roadside fruit stand. It looked ancient, and sitting in front of it, in rocking chairs, were 3 old women. They were ancient, too. Skin like old parchment. Dressed in faded cotton dresses. They were knitting, but they weren't knitting sweaters or scarves. They were knitting a single massive pair of socks. The color of the yarn was electric, an impossible blue that seemed to hum in the air. As I watched, they stopped knitting. All 3 of them turned and looked directly across the highway, directly at me. It wasn't a casual glance. It was like they were looking through me, like I was a specimen in a jar. The one on the right took out a giant pair of scissors. They were gleaming gold, big enough to shear a sheep. She passed them to the woman in the middle. I saw Grover's reflection in the window. His face was dead white. He was watching them, too. The old woman in the middle stretched the blue yarn tight. Then, with a single, deliberate movement, she brought the shears together. Snip. The thread was cut. I felt a jolt, like I'd touched a live wire. Inside the bus, Grover grabbed my arm. His grip was like iron. "Get back on the bus," he hissed. "Both of us. Now." The driver finally got the bus started, and as we pulled away, I looked back. The fruit stand was gone. There was just an empty roadside and the 3 old women in their rocking chairs, staring after our bus. Grover was trembling. He looked like he was going to be sick. "Percy," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "when we get to the bus station, you have to let me walk you home. Promise me?" I promised. I didn't know what I had just seen. I didn't know why cutting a piece of yarn had terrified my best friend. But I knew one thing for sure. I was in more trouble than I could possibly imagine. That is the end of Chapter 2. If you made it here, let me know. I would love feedback. Chapter 3. Grover unexpectedly loses his pants. I felt a little guilty ditching Grover at the bus station. He looked so lost and terrified, and I had promised to let him walk me home. But I hadn't seen my mom in months, and I couldn't wait another second. Besides, I told myself, he's a big boy. Or a big whatever he was. I was still trying to scrub the image of the old ladies and their giant scissors from my brain. I took a cab to our apartment on the Upper East Side. And by our, I mean my mom's and mine. My stepfather was just there, a permanent, smelly fixture. His name is Gabe Ugliano. I called him Smelly Gabe. He looked like a walrus in thrift store clothes, and he was usually found holding a half-empty beer bottle in a losing poker hand. The apartment always reeked of his cheap cigars and stale beer. He and his buddies were right there at the poker table when I walked in. He didn't even look up, just grunted and asked if I had any cash. He called me a drain on his resources. Me. The guy was a professional leech. I didn't have any cash, and I told him so. He made a rude comment about it, and I slammed my bedroom door, trying to get the image of his comb-over and his layers of chins out of my head. For a guy who had never worked a day in his life, he sure knew how to complain. But then, my mom came home, and the whole world got brighter. My mom, Sally Jackson, is the best person on the planet. She's beautiful, with long brown hair and eyes that change color in the light. Her smile is the warmest thing you've ever seen, but there's always a little bit of sadness in her eyes too. Like she's seen things she can't forget. She works at a candy shop in Grand Central, and she always came home smelling like chocolate and licorice. That night, she gave me a huge hug and asked if I was okay. She looked right at me, and I knew she could tell something was wrong. But then she gave me that rebellious smile of hers and said she had a surprise. We were going to the beach, to Montauk. I couldn't believe it. Smelly Gabe never let us go. The beach cabin was our place. My mom and I had been going there since I was a baby. It was where she met my dad. Gabe protested, of course. He whined about who was going to make him his 7-layer bean dip. My mom just looked at him, her expression calm and steady, and said she'd stock the fridge. He could make it himself. He grumbled, but he let us go. For my mom, that was as good as a blessing. She packed our bags, and we were out of there in under an hour. The whole drive out to the tip of Long Island, I felt this weight lifting off my shoulders. We played car games, and my mom let me eat all the blue candy I wanted. She has this thing for blue food. It started as a joke with Gabe. He once told her there was no such thing as blue food. So ever since, she's gone out of her way to prove him wrong. Blue birthday cakes, blue corn chips, blue everything. It was her own little way of saying that the world could be whatever color she wanted it to be. As we got closer to Montauk, she got serious. She asked me about Yancey, about what had happened. I wanted to tell her everything. About Mrs. Dodds turning into a demon, about the old ladies cutting the yarn. But I couldn't. She already had so much to deal with because of me. I couldn't ruin this trip. So I just said, nothing. She looked out at the ocean. Percy, she said quietly, I want to talk to you about your father. I tensed up. We never talked about him. All I knew was that he was lost at sea. He wasn't lost at sea, Percy, she said, as if reading my mind. He was different, powerful, kind. But he had enemies, dangerous ones. That's why he had to leave. She looked at me, her eyes full of a pain I didn't understand. He wanted you to go to a special summer camp, a place where you'd be safe. I didn't get it. A summer camp? Why now? I didn't want to send you away, she said, her voice cracking. It feels like I'm saying goodbye, like I'm sending you to them. That night at the cabin, the wind howled. I had a nightmare. I was on a stormy beach. A magnificent white horse and a golden eagle were fighting, trying to kill each other right there on the sand. And I heard a voice deep in the earth, cold and ancient and evil, whispering, "Go on, little heroes. Tear each other apart." I woke up with a start. The dream was gone, but the storm was real. It wasn't just a storm. It was a full-blown hurricane, hammering the coast. The lights flickered, and then someone started pounding on our cabin door, a frantic, desperate pounding. My mom and I looked at each other, terrified. She crept to the door and looked through the peephole. She gasped. She threw the door open, and there he was, my friend, Grover. But it wasn't the Grover I knew. He was soaking wet, out of breath, and he wasn't wearing any pants. And where his feet should have been, there weren't feet. There were cloven hooves. His legs were furry and goat-like. The muscle disease. The weird walk. the way he could run so fast. It all clicked into place in the most insane way possible. Grover wasn't a boy with a disability. He was a satyr, like the ones in my Latin textbook. He locked eyes with my mom, his face full of panic. He didn't even seem to notice my shock. "It's right behind me," he bleated. "I didn't have enough time." My mom grabbed her keys. She looked at me, her face pale but determined. "Percy," she said, her voice deadly serious, "get in the car, both of you, now." That is the end of Chapter 3. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more. Chapter 4. My mother teaches me bullfighting. The world tilted on its axis. Grover, my best friend, was a goat boy. My mom, who I thought was just a candy store worker, was acting like a special forces operative. She shoved a set of car keys at me and yelled, "Percy, you drive!" "I'll help Grover." I just stared at her. "I can't drive, I'm 12. She didn't miss a beat. She grabbed Grover, who was moaning and holding his leg, and hauled him toward our '78 Camaro. I scrambled after them, my mind a whirlpool of confusion and fear. We piled in, my mom behind the wheel, and she peeled out of the muddy driveway, spraying gravel and sand into the night. "Okay," I said, my voice shaking as I looked at Grover's hooves. "Someone please tell me what is going on." "Percy," my mom said, her eyes locked on the dark, rain-slicked road. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you everything sooner." "That thing in the road, the fruit stand," Grover bleated from the back seat, his voice filled with terror. "That wasn't a coincidence. They were the fates. They cut your life thread, Percy. That means you're going to—" He choked on the word. "You're going to die." "No," my mom said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Not if I can help it. We're almost there." "Almost where?" I yelled over the roar of the wind and the engine. "And what was Mrs. Dodds? You knew about her, didn't you, Grover?" He winced. "A kindly one, Percy, a fury, one of the 3 worst monsters from the underworld. For a fury to come after you at school? That's never happened before. Someone must have sent her. Someone is very, very angry." He kept talking about my scent, how half-bloods smell like food to monsters, and how the stronger you are, the more you smell like an all-you-can-eat buffet. "So this whole year, you were protecting me?" I asked. "I was trying," he groaned. "I'm a keeper. It's my job. But I failed." Suddenly, there was a deafening crack of thunder, and a flash of lightning lit up the entire sky. And in that brief, terrible flash, I saw him. There was a figure running behind our car. It was impossibly huge, at least 7 feet tall, and built like a bodybuilder. But its head was a massive bull's head, with horns as long as my arms. It was the Minotaur, the monster from the stories Mr. Brunner told us, the monster that lived in the labyrinth, and it was gaining on us. "Mom!" I screamed. She floored it. The Camaro fishtailed on the wet asphalt, but the creature was faster. It let out a roar that shook the car, a sound of pure rage. It lowered its head and charged. There was a sound like a freight train hitting a brick wall. The back of the car was lifted off the ground, and we were sent flying into a ditch. My head slammed against the side window. For a second, all I saw were stars. I came to, smelling gasoline and burnt hair. The car was a wreck, the roof torn open like a sardine can. My mom was trying to shake me awake. Grover was unconscious in the back. Outside, the Minotaur was sniffing the air, trying to find us. "We have to run," my mom whispered, her voice strained. "The hill. Percy, you see that big pine tree at the top?" I saw it. It was the biggest tree I'd ever seen, standing alone at the crest of a hill. "That's the property line," she said, her voice urgent. "Get to that tree and you'll be safe. It can't cross the boundary." We crawled out of the car. My mom and I half-dragged, half-carried Grover up the slippery, muddy hill. He was heavier than he looked. The Minotaur saw us. It roared again and started climbing, its hooves digging into the earth. It was coming for me. We were only halfway up the hill, and it was already just a few yards away. We weren't going to make it. All 3 of us were going to die. My mom must have realized it at the same second I did. She shoved me hard, sending me stumbling forward. "Go, Percy!" she screamed. "Run!" She turned to face the monster. She stood there, a lone, defiant figure in the pouring rain, and spread her arms. "Get away from my son!" The Minotaur didn't even hesitate. It charged her. Its massive hand closed around her throat, lifting her off her feet. She struggled, kicking, trying to break free. She looked at me one last time, her eyes full of love. And then she wasn't there anymore. She dissolved, not into dust, but into a shimmering golden shower of light that faded into the rain. She was just gone. Something inside me broke. A roar of pure rage ripped from my throat. I wasn't scared anymore. I was going to kill this thing. I took off my bright red jacket. "Hey, beefhead!" I screamed, waving the jacket. "Ground beef!" The monster turned to me, sniffing the air. I waved the jacket again, like a matador. It snorted, pawed the ground, and charged. I waited until the last possible second, then jumped to the side. The Minotaur, unable to stop, slammed headfirst into the giant pine tree with a sickening crunch. It was stunned. I scrambled forward, leaped onto its back, and grabbed one of its horns with both hands. I pulled with all my might. The monster thrashed, trying to throw me, but I held on, adrenaline surging through me. There was a wet cracking sound, and the horn broke off in my hands. It threw me to the ground. I landed hard, but I held on to the horn. It was a jagged, heavy piece of bone. The Minotaur turned on me, its eyes full of pain and rage. It lowered its head to gore me. But as it charged, I planted my feet, aimed the broken horn like a dagger, and drove it with all my strength into the creature's side, right below its massive rib cage. The monster froze. It looked down at the horn buried in its side, then at me. It let out a final gurgling roar, and then, just like Mrs. Dodds, it began to dissolve. It crumbled from the top down, turning into a mountain of thick, gray dust that the rain immediately washed away. I was alone on the hill, holding a monster's horn. My mother was gone. I don't remember much after that. I remember dragging Grover's unconscious body the rest of the way up the hill. I remember collapsing on the porch of a big farmhouse, a place that felt warm and safe. I remember seeing a girl with curly blonde hair, a girl I felt I should know, and then I saw a familiar face sitting in a wheelchair on the porch, looking down at me with an expression that wasn't disappointment anymore. It was relief. It was Mr. Brunner. And then my world went completely black. End chapter 4. Comment suggestions for what we should show on this channel. Chapter 5. I play Pinochle with a horse. I remember drifting in a warm, hazy darkness. There was a voice, a girl's voice, that cut through the fog now and then. She'd say things like, "What will happen at the solstice?" And a more familiar voice, Mr. Brunner's, would murmur a reply. Sometimes I was aware of a spoon at my lips, feeding me something that tasted like heaven. Not just any heaven, my heaven. It tasted exactly like my mom's homemade blue chocolate chip cookies, still warm from the oven. It seemed to melt on my tongue and send warmth through my whole body. Once my eyes fluttered open. I saw the girl, her hair like spun gold, looking down at me. Next to her was my Latin teacher, Mr. Brunner. They were watching me. Then the darkness pulled me back under. When I finally woke up for good, the first thing I noticed was the light. It was soft, filtering through a window that overlooked a beautiful green valley. I was in a comfortable bed in a large wood-paneled room. On the wall opposite me was the head of a leopard, its glass eyes staring right at me. I wasn't alone. My friend Grover was sitting in a chair watching me sleep. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You saved my life, Percy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry about your mom. I'm the worst keeper in the world. I froze. If I had just... My own grief hit me then, a cold, heavy weight in my chest. My mom was gone. The memory of her dissolving into golden light was so vivid, so impossible. I held up the thing I was still clutching in my hand, the heavy, jagged bull's horn. "It wasn't your fault, Grover," I said, my voice hoarse. I told him what happened, how she had saved us. He just shook his head, looking miserable. Just then, the blonde girl from my dream state walked in. She was about my age, with an athletic build and a deep tan. But it was her eyes that got me. They were a startling, stormy gray, like the sky right before a thunderstorm. They were beautiful but also intense and analytical, like she was calculating 1,000 things about me all at once. "You drool when you sleep," she said. So much for a warm welcome. She was holding a glass of the same pudding-like stuff I'd been fed while I was out. She explained that it was ambrosia, the food of the gods, and it could heal half-bloods, but too much could burn you to a crisp. Great. Another thing that could kill me. She introduced herself as Annabeth. As she fed me, she peppered me with questions. What happened to the Minotaur? What happened on the bus? She was intensely curious, and I got the feeling she wasn't just making small talk. She was trying to figure me out. When I was strong enough to stand, she led me outside onto the porch of the big house, as she called it, and I saw it. The camp. It was a valley nestled between rolling hills, with a forest on one side and the sparkling blue of the Long Island Sound on the other. There was a lake, a bunch of Greek-style buildings with marble columns, a volleyball court, and fields of strawberries that smelled impossibly sweet. Kids, dozens of them, were running around, practicing archery, sword fighting, even riding freaking Pegasi by the lake. It was the most incredible place I had ever seen. On the porch, a game of pinochle was underway. Two men were playing against Mr. Brunner. One of them was a large, pudgy man in a loud, tiger-striped Hawaiian shirt. He had a sour face and was sipping a Diet Coke. The other man, I didn't know who he was, but Mr. Brunner seemed to know him. Annabeth introduced me. The pudgy man barely looked up from his cards. "Oh, great," he grumbled. "Another one." He called me Peter Johnson, then Perry Johansson. He couldn't seem to get my name right. "This is Mr. D," Annabeth whispered to me. "He's the camp director." Mr. Brunner, or who I thought was Mr. Brunner, looked at me with a kind smile. "Percy," he said, "I'm glad to see you're well." Mr. D slammed his cards down. "I suppose I have to say hello to the brats? So hello." He sighed, a deeply put-upon sound. "Now, Chiron, if you're done with your little reunion, are you going to tell him or not?" My head was spinning. Wait, Chiron? Like the Chiron from the myths? Mr. D rolled his eyes. In the flesh. Or whatever. I looked at Mr. Brunner, completely bewildered. He offered me a small, sad smile. "I'm afraid I've been a bit dishonest with you, Percy." Mr. D waved a lazy hand. "Oh, stop hiding. Let the boy see." And then the strangest thing happened. Mr. Brunner stood up, but he didn't just stand up from his wheelchair. He unfolded. His upper body, his tweed jacket, his arms, his head, rose up. But his lower half kept going. Where his legs should have been, a powerful white stallion's body emerged from the magical wheelchair, which seemed to collapse in on itself and vanish. His human torso seamlessly joined the horse's body at the withers. I was staring at a centaur. My Latin teacher was a horse from the waist down. He stood there, all 15 hands of him, his horsetail swishing back and forth. The wheelchair had just been an illusion, a place to hide his other half. I was speechless. My jaw was probably on the floor. Charon looked down at me, his eyes full of the same ancient wisdom I'd always seen in them, but now it all made a terrible, impossible kind of sense. "Welcome to Camp Half-Blood," he said. "That will conclude the first video. Thank you for watching and turn on notifications to see when the next chapters come out. There are 22 chapters in the first book and many more great Percy Jackson stories to hear.